Well, let's get more now. We can cross to Jerusalem and speak to Gershon Baskin, a former Israeli peace negotiator. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. As ever, a pleasure talking to you, Gershon. I just want to pick up on what we were discussing with one of our earlier guests, the academic from Haifa, who suggested evacuations from Gaza are necessary, and he suggested rehousing the population of Gaza in places like Sinai and Indonesia. I mean, are these widely held opinions in Israel right now?
I think from looking at the policy of the Israeli government, of what they're doing, what their plans are for Gaza, it seems quite evident that what they are going to be trying to do is to push the 2.2 million Gazans into the southwest corner of the Gaza Strip alongside the Sinai border to Egypt. This is a pressure cooker, and the pressure will explode. And I think that the hope of the more extreme elements within the Netanyahu government, even perhaps Netanyahu himself, is that the 2.2 million Gazans will break through the border into Egypt, and we'll have a new reality where people are escaping an active war, trying to save their own lives. You can hardly blame those people for wanting to get out of Gaza, which has been made uninhabitable by Israel during the past 22 months. But there is really no country in the world that I know of that's willing to accept all these Palestinians, both for reasons of politics, of not collaborating with Israel and trying to remove the issue of the rights of the Palestinian people to statehood, to self-determination, along with the sheer economic factor of not willing to take in 2 million refugees into their own countries, which would, we have a big problem of immigration and refugees all over the world today. In Europe, it's a very big problem. It's not less of a problem in countries like Egypt or Indonesia or South Sudan or any other place that Israel says that they're negotiating to take the Palestinians. And Palestinians ideologically, in principle, don't want to leave Gaza. People may feel that they have to leave because their lives are threatened there and they can't live there, but this is not what the Palestinian people want.
Right, and there'll be deep suspicion amongst people, were they to leave Gaza, that they might not be allowed back. And when you look at what's happened the last 70 years, I mean, that's not suspicion that's not entirely unfounded, is it?
No, it's definitely not unfounded. It's a dilemma when I've have friends in Gaza and people who know me who have approached me and say, can you help me leave Gaza? And when I was getting a lot of requests like that, I actually turned to some of my Palestinian friends and I said, this is a dilemma for me because on the personal level, these are friends, these are people I know and respect. And even if I didn't, they're people who are interested in only saving their own lives. But then there's the whole national dilemma of what does this do to the Palestinian cause? Because there are millions of Palestinians in the West Bank, 400,000 Palestinians in East Jerusalem, and of course the 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza who have to have the right to self-determination, to live in freedom in a state of their own, to have security and dignity. And that's also the only way that Israel will have security and dignity and be able to be a member state of this region. So there's the large issue, the macro issue of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the rights of the Palestinian people. And then there's the individual human level issue of helping people save themselves and find a better life.
Gershon, I just want to pick up on another thing that our earlier guest, the one before you, Professor Kamal Hawash, an academic from the UK, was saying to us a little earlier. And he said this to us before. He said that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, is the greatest criminal of the 21st century. He said the greatest criminals of the 20th century had been in Germany, but in the 21st century, it's the Israeli Prime Minister. I'm wondering how that makes you feel and what you make of that assessment.
I think Netanyahu's in a club with a lot of members, and not necessarily he's number one in the club. But my own feeling toward Netanyahu, or my own assessment regarding Netanyahu, is that he has committed crimes against the Israeli people and the Israeli state. And that's my first concern. And I recognize the war crimes that Israel is committing in Gaza and the accusations of genocide, which are in line with the Convention on the Prevention of Genocide. But for me, as an Israeli citizen, he has committed crimes against us, the people of Israel, and our future. Crimes that my children and my grandchildren will be paying for. And we have a responsibility to put him on trial and to remove him from power. There is no question in my mind that he will go down as the worst leader that the Jewish people have ever had. And this is a person who was presenting himself before October 7th as the greatest leader of the Jewish people since Moses. And I'm not joking here. This is something that he has said. As someone who believed that he was protecting Israel and defending Israel, he will actually go down in our history as the worst leader that the Jewish people have ever had.
Why do you think he's committed crimes against the state of Israel? Just talk us through the logic behind that statement, Gershon.
From my perspective, he has implemented a strategy since he came back into office in 2009, which was a strategy aimed at keeping the Palestinian leadership separate, empowering Hamas, the more radical, fanatical side of the Palestinian leadership, delegitimizing Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority, all in order to not have to negotiate with the Palestinians on the creation of a Palestinian state next to Israel. There are more or less equal numbers of Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs between the river and the sea, 7 million of each. And there is no solution to this conflict except for the two-state solution. And Netanyahu waged a strategy since 2009, which was aimed at preventing that from ever happening. Of course, on October 7th, that blew up in our face because you can't prevent people from having freedom. You can't prevent occupying other people for almost 6 decades and expect to live in peace, or lock 2.2 million people in a territory like Gaza with 80% poverty and no place to go and no hopes and no dreams, and expect to have quiet. And this is the strategy that Netanyahu implemented since 2009. In my personal view, that is a crime against our state. That's a crime against our people. And a real leader solves conflicts, doesn't think that he can manage them forever. And of course, when they blew up in our face, he still refuses to take responsibility. And he was the head of the government on October 7th that failed to protect the people of Israel, that led a strategy that empowered and funded Hamas. And he is responsible, and he will be held responsible when eventually we do create a National Commission of Inquiry in Israel, which he is preventing. But it will be created, and he will stand trial.
So, Gershon, what you're saying is that basically having that amount of hatred and anger just behind a border fence, 2 million people who've been humiliated, who've been mistreated, quite the cruelest treatment by anybody's standards these last 22 months. I mean, you're saying that those people in turn represent by an inevitable security threat to Israel. Is that the argument you're making?
That's part of it. I mean, there's no escape for Israel to have to deal with the reality of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the recognition that the Palestinian people have to have the same right to the same rights that the Jewish people have in the state of Israel. Beyond that, we cannot survive for very long if we don't manage to resolve the conflict, not only with the Gazan Palestinians, but with the West Bank and the Palestinians in East Jerusalem. There has to be a resolution of this conflict. It can't go on forever. This war is so horrific, and the consequences of the war that we've seen over the last 22 months are so horrible that we have to ensure that this must be the last Israeli-Palestinian war. We can't keep doing this. We need the help from our allies in the region and around the world, particularly in the region, because the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has to be dealt with in a regional way to build a security regime that ensures the security of all the states in the region and helps us all and leads us to greater economic development in dealing with energy and water and the other challenges that we face in this modern world. The Arab countries surrounding Israel all have an interest in making sure that the Palestinian people have a right to freedom and dignity, and that the Israelis get the security that they need. So we have a potential deal in the entire region that will help us resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And that's what must come when this war is finally over, and hopefully that will be soon as well.
Gershon, I'll ask you about your T-shirt, which we can see there on the screen. Bring them home now. Perhaps we can show it full screen when you start speaking. I'd like to ask you, what is the status of the effort to release the last remaining living hostages in Gaza? I believe there's 20 of them. Do correct me if I'm wrong. Why
right.
is
There's going to be 20.
Believed to be 20. So why is Israel not responding in a positive way to what sounded like some quite positive noises being made by Hamas in this regard? What's going on?
So there are, first of all, 50 hostages all in all, and Israel wants them all returned, including the 30 who are believed to be dead. And Hamas agreed to a partial deal a week ago today. in which there would be a 60-day ceasefire, and Hamas would release about half of the living hostages and half of the dead hostages in exchange for Israel redeploying back to lines that it held back in March. A sharp increase in humanitarian aid being distributed by the international community, other elements of the agreement that is the same agreement that was on the table months ago, even weeks ago, when Israel walked out of those negotiations and blamed Hamas for foiling the negotiations. But Hamas formally agreed to that a week ago and informed the Qataris and the Egyptians, and the Americans were informed. And for a week now, we've been waiting for the government of Israel to meet, the war cabinet to meet, to make a decision on whether or not they accept the agreement that they accepted weeks ago. And there hasn't been even a discussion in the government. Apparently, the cabinet is meeting this evening to discuss it. I would not expect any immediate Israeli response. The Israeli response has been that we don't want a partial deal anymore. We want a whole deal. We want a comprehensive deal. Well, that's what Hamas has been saying for months now. And now the Americans are saying as well, we want a comprehensive deal. Hamas wants a comprehensive deal. But when Israel says it, when Netanyahu says it, he's not talking about an agreement with Hamas. He's talking about Hamas raising a white flag and surrendering. And anyone who knows Hamas knows that that's not going to happen. Hamas will continue fighting, even as more Palestinians get killed. They will continue to fight until the very last Palestinian, as long as they can continue to hurt Israeli soldiers and perhaps kill them. This will only end with an agreement. And the best deal to reach is a comprehensive agreement that ends the war. But Netanyahu is apparently not interested in that. So tomorrow, the hostage families are holding another day of strikes and protest. Last Sunday, 1 million Israelis took to the streets demanding an end to the war. We hope that similar numbers come out tomorrow, maybe even bigger. I will be there at the big rally in Tel Aviv, but there are demonstrations that are going to take place all around the country.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Always a pleasure. Gershon Baskin, former Israeli peace negotiator, thank you very much indeed for your time, sir.